I grew up in a small town, Timaru, hands up for Timaru, just south of Christchurch. I always remember really vividly my dad used to take us to the dump. It was a bit of an outing, strangely enough. You might remember that. We used to load up Dad's old Vauxhall, used to put on the trailer if it was a really heavy load to carry. Dad did a bit of voluntary work, so, we always picked up a bit of stuff on the way down. Dad liked to have a full load, justify the fuel. We used to pop past Nana's, pick up the stuff there, a few coal sacks and what have you. So we got to the dump. It wasn't called a landfill back then or a household recovery centre, nothing like that. It was a dump. And we used to dump everything there. You'd go in the dump. We were dumping car batteries. We were dumping oil. We were dumping appliances. We were dumping carpets. You name it. It went into that dump. There was always a couple of exceptions. As a good Boy Scout, I used to gather up, you remember that zesty drink that came in glass bottles? It was 4 cents for a small one and 8 cents for a large one. Someone might remember that. And that was the start of the deposit return scheme, of course, that we'll talk about a bit later. But Dad always used to grab a bit of scrap if there was some metal hanging about in the load. He would go past the scrap dealer on the way out of the landfill. So these sorts of landfills, these dumps, everything went into them. Everything. So what really were we thinking? What on earth were we thinking? What a crazy notion that we were dumping. A huge amount of material. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars of valuable materials we're burying in the ground. And we're still doing it. The worst problem here, of course, is that material is making a significant contribution to greenhouse gas and climate change. We cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet, right? It's got to be clear. And we have to deliver zero waste to achieve zero emissions. I'm not here to talk about the climate emergency. We are all in the middle of it, of course. There's people, as we speak, getting airlifted in Australia out of the floods. Auckland's had their 1 in 100-year flood twice in the last fortnight. You might have seen last night there's 10 feet of snow, 3 metres of snow, might be 10 metres of snow on the mountains above in California. The UK, and I'm not complaining, of course, we had our hottest temperatures last summer of 40 degrees. But we can really see here that there's problems, and waste is a significant contribution to human-created methane gas. And methane gas is the worst type of greenhouse gas that we are producing. So it can be no surprise in this room that zero waste, is a climate game changer. The problem is, why does waste never feature on any discussions about greenhouse gas emissions? You might remember we had COP26 in Scotland a couple of years ago. Poor waste management practices weren't even mentioned. Go figure that, right? Thank goodness for me, and I've written a few articles that really complains a bit about that, and of course COP27, which was last year, finally started to address poor waste management practices and their contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. So why isn't waste mentioned a bit more? I think I've got a few ideas. I think it's far more interesting to talk about electric cars, offshore wind farms, solar panels, fart tax, carbon capture, nuclear fusion. I think it's also because when we throw stuff away, you know what it's like, we bung it in the black bag, it goes out the gate. Then we see it as someone else's problem, out of sight, out of mind. I'm reminded by my daughter, who, thank you for delivering the rubbish, talk about the tragedy of the commons. Who owns the sea? No one owns the sea. Bung it in the sea, who cares, right? So waste, so no one's talking about waste, and I wanted to bring this picture up actually, and you'll probably take a little bit of a minute to focus on it. That yellow thing up there is a very big bulldozer. And these things that look a bit like whale bones are in fact windmill blades. And so what we're doing here is we're producing a material that is very hard to recycle in a place that's hard to get to a recycling facility. We're actually chopping up windmill blades into 3 and we're burying them in the ground. Look, I'm not against wind power, of course, but this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you probably can't even believe this picture. You probably go and have to do a bit of a Google to make sure I'm not just making it up. So this is bad. This is bad news. This is bad news. So waste is here to stay, and kind of what can we do about it? So given we're an accounting conference here, we should talk a bit about legislation. You've all come across, hopefully, the Paris Agreement, and the Paris Agreement was an agreement signed up to by the world's nations. The concept here was we were really trying to limit global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees. Obviously, we're seeing climate change, we're seeing global warming already, and it's not looking good. My personal opinion about 1.5 degrees is it's probably unattainable. And even where it is today, there are some countries that are uninhabitable now because of the extreme heat that they're faced. We all know this one really well, and I'll tell you why. The Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. What was really cool, just this week, the Institute published a survey. I don't know if anyone's seen it on LinkedIn, filled it out, hopefully. There's around 1,300 companies in the UK at the moment who are required to think a bit harder about their climate-related disclosures. The survey here, which is really cool, is really asking us as chartered accountants in the businesses we're representing and in, they're asking us, do we know what's going on? If we know what's going on, what are we doing about it? If we don't know what's going on, why don't we know what's going on? And how can the Institute support that? So some great training materials and some education coming from the Institute on that. So really good in terms of what's happening there. The task force is there to make sure that companies are reporting their climate-related usage and risks in their annual reports. I want to go and buy something for an organisation. You think about those energy efficiency pictures you see on our refrigerators. I want to go to buy my next jacket or pair of shoes from an organisation that's green, someone who's running their business sustainably. So we hope to see some real improvements and some real interesting things coming out of the legislation that and the policymakers around the Institute here. Another act that you may have heard of, Joe Biden, thank you very much, last year signed the Inflation Reducing Act. You might say, what's that got to do with environmental topics, waste topics? Good news is he pumped nearly $400 billion of federal funding into clean energy with a view of lowering the US's carbon emissions. And of course, the US are huge consumers of materials and huge creators of waste. So that's really good news. The European Green Deal, you can imagine in Europe, loads of countries, loads of legislations, loads of rules about what we do with waste. How do we manage waste? How do we manage climate change? So this Green Deal is trying to bring together that legislation and a set of goals and ways of working. The European Union really want to see themselves as a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy. Not to be outdone, of course. Anyone heard of the UK Environmental Act? There's got to be some. This is a brilliant piece of legislation. This is absolutely world-leading legislation when it comes to environmental programs. It's setting an example to the rest of the world. Absolutely brilliant. I guess you're all going to go home now and look it up, but I'm going to tell you a few things about it. Extended producer responsibility means the organisations making this stuff, making these things, have a responsibility to dispose of it, recycle it, refurbish it when you're finished with it. So that's absolutely fantastic. If we go back a couple of 40 years, to when I was collecting my glass bottles as a kid, getting my 4 cents. The deposit return scheme is kicking off in Scotland at the moment, and what it basically means is every single-use container will have 20 cents added to the value of that container. It's happening now. And of course, when you take that container back, as I did, you get some money back. Happy days. I tell you what, the complaints that are happening because of this, we've got such a massive environmental problem. One of the opposition parties in Scotland want to completely disregard this legislation. They think it's going to be too much work for the retailers to manage. I'll tell you what was too much work and too much of a problem. If you open your Sky News app, I think today still, you'll see on there that a team of scientists in Australia and North America have identified a disease in birds, fishing birds, caused only by single-use plastic. They're ingesting plastic. This is a disease solely attributed to birds ingesting plastic. That's disgusting. And these guys are worried about paying 20 cents a bottle, which you get back when you take. It's just beggars belief. Charges for single-use plastic. We're seeing the results of this, of course. Our supermarket bags, we're getting charged for our bags. Of course, hopefully no one uses bags. Again, my daughter, who was got a bit of avocado out for a breakfast this morning, I thought I would have a look at the label on this. And of course, the difficulty is here that says recycle with bags at large supermarket. And you look at that and you think, you know what people are going to do, right? They're going to come over here and they're going to drop it here. We have to improve this process. Greater consistency in recycling in the UK. I reckon if I told you what bins I have at my gate, you'd probably all have different types, right? I've got a food waste bin, I've got my recyclable bin, I've got my general waste bin, I've got something for my other garden waste. We need to get more consistency in that in all local authorities in the UK. It's just not good enough. Some organisations here are still not collecting food waste in the UK, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Electronic waste is bad, and we're talking about some opportunities here within the Act to track that a little bit better. And of course, fly tipping is a big problem. You've all seen it, right? It's everywhere. Unfortunately, I don't know. Everyone lives all over the UK. You see trash dumped on the side of the road. It's just disgusting. There's this particular company in South America, this country, that had a very novel idea to track fly tipping. It strapped a GoPro to a vulture and a team of vultures, because they naturally hunt down, where waste is deposited, like food waste, etc. So in fact, they mapped out the city using these things. Fantastic technology. I say technology. Waste crime is a big problem. You've seen it, you've heard of it. Look, you've got something to put at your gate to give away. You hope the guy knocks on his door, says, I can dispose of that correctly. I've got a waste carrier's license, happy days. He picks it up and he takes it around and drops it in a bloody park around the corner, right? There's a terrible problem with waste crime in the UK, and this Act is giving the organisations more teeth to prosecute and send these people to jail. Talk about that labelling. The other thing that's coming in, you're sitting there above your recycling bin with a bit of plastic, you don't know where it goes. There's great incentives now, education programs, improving the labelling on product to make us more aware of what we do with the stuff when we're finished with it. Shipping of hazardous waste is a terrible situation, and that's great, but we're banning and restricting exporting waste to developing countries. Hopefully you've seen in the news on occasion that even UK waste hauliers, waste collectors, have got themselves into trouble for shipping containers of trash into developing countries who are quite happy to take the money. And what happens? They tip it in a hole in the ground or burn it and create a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So banning and restricting this is a brilliant improvement. So what a fantastic bit of legislation that, of course, no one's ever heard of. But please go home tonight and get that out and tell your family about it. There's certainly an important area to bring to everyone's attention. And again, I'm really hoping that this is something you've come across before. This is about the circular economy. So if I go back to my point I made earlier, we've buried billions, maybe trillions of dollars of materials, valuable materials. The point for me here is let's not bury millions more. Are we that stupid? We're currently living a linear economy, right? Have a look at this picture. Hopefully you can see it. We mine the material, we produce the goods, we distribute the goods, we use the goods. The trouble is we dispose of the goods. And when we dispose of the goods and it ends up in landfill, there we go again, right? We're creating environmental damage, we're producing greenhouse emissions like you won't believe. So the concept here of the circular economy is absolutely critical to the conversations today and the conversations around zero waste. It's not rocket science, funny enough. Instead of disposing of it, reuse it. Use it for longer. Don't go out and buy that winter coat every winter. Use it for a couple of seasons. Use your shoes until they wear out. Why not? Let's be less materialistic. It's a bit hard, of course. We've got so much stuff thrust in front of us. We get out the credit card, we go to Amazon and happy days. Eh? Let's use stuff for longer. Let's reuse what we've got. Let's remanufacture and refurbish the stuff we're using. Let's redesign, let's recycle. We're talking about those windmill blades. Let's produce windmill blades instead of these complex composite materials, which I understand are necessary for the high strains of a windmill blade, but can we not make stuff that can be recycled? A windmill blade lasts 20 years. Someone's thinking, well, 20 years, who cares? I won't be around to worry about that. So the circular economy is really important, and I'd like you all please to have a bit of a read, if you can, of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This website, Ellen MacArthur, has been a huge thought leader in the circular economy for many years. Very, very important concepts and very simple concepts. The good news is, as accountants, that the circular economy represents a market opportunity of trillions. So instead of tossing the stuff in the hole, let's reuse it, let's refurbish it. It's as simple. Not only that, it creates an incredible additional labour opportunity. Not that we've got any staff at the moment, but if people wanted jobs, there's plenty of jobs here. So the circular economy is a really important takeaway from today, and I really would encourage you to go to this website and have a little bit of a look at just what that's all about. The other thing that I hope you've all come across, they call it the waste hierarchy. Now this picture here, it's different colours, different narratives, but generally speaking, it's a 5-level structure, and the bottom structure is dispose. We don't want anything to get down here. So what can we do? What can we do as we sit here around the room? And I'll draw our attention to the prevent and the reuse. And I touched a little bit on this in the previous slide. But let's stop waste from being created in the first place. If we stop it, we don't have a problem. Of course, we can't ultimately stop it. But let's use less materials in our design and our manufacturing. Let's use less harmful chemicals in our manufacturing. Let's keep products for longer. We've all had the same problem, haven't we? The washing machine breaks down. And you think, shit. I could go to Amazon, $350. The thing's there. I've got a replacement the next day. They take the old one away. They'll tell me it's recycled. Is it getting recycled? Who knows, right? Why don't we refurbish those things? Let's stop throwing stuff away. You'll probably say, well, Chris, I can't find a plumber or an electrician for love of money, right? But we have to start recycling and refurbishing, repairing that stuff that we're currently using. It's no longer acceptable to continue to throw this stuff away. Recycling and recovering, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that. The most obvious here is recycling, commodities recycling. Look, metals, glass, plastic, paper, rubber, cardboard become a very, very valuable commodity when they're recycled. You'll be surprised. We need more investment in recycling plants globally. We've got a customer in Ohio, and they're investing at the moment $90 million in a new recycling plant in Columbus. Brilliant technology. That's coming with a wonderful education centre for all the schools to start educating them on the dangers of tossing stuff in the hole in the ground. So this stuff needs investment. This investment is not cheap. Metals is a really good example of that circular model of material that can be recovered and recycled. You can keep recycling metal forever. The London Metals price is quoted on the LME. Has anyone heard of the London Metals Exchange, right? It's here in London. Over COVID, there was such a demand for copper because we're all buying up TVs and laptops and the rest of it. But finally, companies were turning and looking at recycled copper. China was amazing. Drove the commodities price, drove the metal price up significantly over COVID. I mean, that's eased off a little bit now. But this material has a value. And if we appreciate that value, then that value will bring these organisations investing in this equipment more value. They can invest more, we can recycle more. The real kicker here is if we stop getting stuff out of the ground, take metals as an example, if we stop mining metal, that mining process in itself creates an incredible amount of greenhouse gas emissions. It's an incredible amount. What we need to do is collect that scrap, heads off to the foundry, goes in with a bit of virgin product, and out comes virgin iron steel again, right? That stuff can be recycled over and over again. There's another area that's very topical, and hopefully we're seeing a bit more, or you're reading a little bit on it, is anaerobic digestion. So what is that? You might see these plants around the countryside. We've got a customer that has a lot of these anaerobic digestion plants. And why are they being successful? Because food waste represents 62% of all methane released. When food waste goes into a landfill, that is the key problem. It breaks down and it releases methane gas. It's incredible. You wouldn't believe. Of all food waste we throw away, only 5% doesn't make it into landfill. I bet there's lots of you in the room that do not put their food waste in a separate food container at their gate for that to be collected. I'm sure that is the case, still in the UK. So anaerobic digestion plants can be scaled at any level. Could be one of these, could be many levels. It's a very, very simple process. You collect your food matter, you stick it in there, you add a few little enzymes, bit of ethyl dust, something secret happens in there. But it creates gas. That gas goes back into our supply and powers our boilers and our stoves. It produces water, which generally goes into holding ponds on the farmers' paddocks, and it produces some solid material, which then is used for compost. We need investment in this stuff, and we are seeing it, but we need more investment in this. A little bit of an example of recovery. Hopefully most people know that when you pick up a plastic bottle, you'd be surprised how much hydrocarbon, how much oil goes into making plastic. It's a bit unbelievable, actually, when you look at the statistics. So there was a plant, again, this is pretty topical, it's circling on LinkedIn just in the last few days. But the world, look, what do we talk about plastic, eh? The world generates millions and millions of tons of plastic. And we're going to be producing millions and millions of tons more. It's estimated that very little plastic gets recycled. And the worst of it, 22% goes into uncontrolled landfills, rivers, and our oceans. This plant here in Kenya has a lot of labour. It scours all the landfills, gets the plastic, and the plastic goes back through a process where it's shredded, goes through some extreme heat, and it turns into an oil again, a diesel. 12 tonnes of plastic, the statistic is probably advanced since I got this, but 12 tonnes of plastic can produce around 7,000 litres of oil. So a great example where we're taking that material and returning it back to its original. I bet this is something we haven't thought about. It's happening. Landfill mining. So we have thousands and thousands of landfills and dumps. In the UK, we've got hundreds. In fact, they don't even know where all the landfills are. The problem is the seas encroach more on the land as rivers change direction. It's uncovering this rubbish that we've dumped. On the banks of rivers, you're seeing batteries. You're seeing chemical waste. You're seeing paint tins. The biggest issue here is when these landfills are what we would call unengineered or unsanitized. It means there is no underlying lining in this landfill, and there is a lot of them. And what does that mean, of course, is all the poisons, all the leachates get down into the water supply. It poisons the water. It poisons the earth. I had a customer in Lagos in Nigeria, and heading to their landfill was soul-destroying. Into that landfill was going chemical waste, medical waste, their general waste. There were populations on these landfills. The life expectancy was in their 20s because there was so much toxin in their body they hardly lived through their 20s. There was one that had a nightclub on it, and every now and then these landfills, they subside and hundreds of people are killed. These things are mountains of this stuff. So the ultimate goal, of course, of mining landfills is to get the material back out again. Find the recyclables and find the reusable materials. These landfills here, we all know what a landfill or a dump looks like. They get capped. We all thought, I thought that when stuff went to a dump, it biodegraded. When it goes into these landfills and it's capped with a foot of clay, it seals it brilliantly. There was a program on television here in the UK a couple of years ago, and they opened up one of these landfills not so long ago. I think it had finished its useful life around the mid-70s. They dug back into it again. It wasn't this one. The newspapers, from the 70s, you could almost read them like they were printed yesterday. Bags of clothing, you could probably stick them on and go to, we see what some of these kids wear. You could probably go out and wear them again, So there's valuable materials in these landfills. And in the case of unengineered landfills, getting these toxins out, getting these poisons out is really, really important. This stuff is leaking into our water supply. There are statistics now in UK rivers about how much they are detecting from these landfills in our river supply. This is happening now. This is not shit, this is someone else's problem, right? This is now our problem. The challenge here, as you can imagine, the cost of extraction of this is expensive and it needs some serious economic incentives to get on with this. Another area that I think probably most of you will come across before is waste to energy. Plants look a little like this. There's hundreds of these in the world. There's quite a few in the UK. What it's basically doing is, the trucks come around, they collect the stuff from our gate, shoots around the back of these sites, dumps it in a big hopper, and they burn it. So waste incineration, it's not renewable energy. Right? We're burning a valuable material to create electricity, right? So that's quite handy, I get it. But it's not renewable. And what happens in these plants, especially the old plants, what they're burning, the greenhouse gases, right? Terrible stuff we're pumping into the atmosphere out the back of this. Now, a lot of the newer plants, the output goes through chalk washes and other things, right? So they're less invasive. But some real challenges here. Now, burning waste is wasteful. But there is a lot of material that we can't reuse. You look at that landfill, there's a lot of stuff that we're never going to be able to recycle. We can't use it again. So waste to energy gives us an outlet to at least stop this stuff going to landfill, stop poisoning our environment. You might have seen, and it's been, again, a little bit topical with a lot of economies turning on their coal-fired power stations again. And there was some news more recently, I think it was India this week, where they've worked out, in fact, that if you burn a ton of waste, it's equivalent to burning half a ton of coal. So, in fact, they're starting to convert, well, not even convert, they're really throwing waste into their coal-fired plants, which is probably less of a problem than burning coal. So we're seeing some interesting things around waste to energy. So I mentioned before fart tax. Is it possible to collect some methane in this way? I'm joking. Scientists in Australia used red seaweed, and I'm sure some of you know about this. And red seaweed, when fed to cows, is a food supplement. Reduces methane. These are huge producers of methane, huge producers. This supplement reduced methane output by, I mean, it sounds too good to be true, something like 90%. I mean, you can fact check that. Even if it's 50%, it's a huge benefit. So I've got a bit of a view on this. Don't be surprised to know I was a Kiwi. I think we've been living a false economy. In fact, I know we have, and I think we all know we have. Who's paid the cost of this stuff going to landfills? As accountants, right? Where's that on? That's not on the balance sheet, that crap we've buried, is it? It's gone. It's time we all paid. And I think it's too late for carrots, right? I think we need sticks. The first thing we absolutely have to do is make sure we're lobbying our governments, our local authorities, our waste collectors, to at least give us the opportunity to sort and segregate our waste at the door. Municipal collections, residential collections from our houses are the worst form. It's creating thousands of tons of, millions of tons of waste going into landfill. So let's make sure, at a very minimum, we can segregate our waste and make sure our councils are collecting that waste and make sure they're taking it to the right place. Throw one of those Apple tags into your waste bin next time and see where it ends up. There's this model here called pay as you throw. Now, this is the thing. And this thing actually is in place and working incredibly well in parts of Ireland. What does pay as you throw mean? Well, it's pretty obvious. The first thing we must do is any containers, waste containers, I'm going to use a wheelie bin, right? So one or two of us will have wheelie bins in our front yards for our waste. We need to pay for that bin, right? It's like, oh, where's that bin? Who cares? It's down the road. I'll phone the council, get another one, right? Forget that. We need to pay for our bins. Those bins need to be tagged. So if you go home and have a look at your wheelie bin, right, you tilt it back on the wheels, a little bit of a handle, circular handle. That's actually built to hold an RFID tracker in that handle. You probably don't know that. It's a European standard. So that container needs to be tracked. And that tracking device needs to link that bin with me, Chris Williams, green waste, that container. So far, so good. Every collection vehicle, so when the truck comes down the road, those trucks need to be fitted with reading devices. Now, it could be an RFID tag, could be an NFC label, could be a barcode, doesn't really matter what the heck it is, right? As long as that bin can be identified. The truck comes down the road, he lifts up that bin, detects that bin, knows it's my bin. The camera's on the truck, the weighing mechanism on the truck, they weigh the bin, the cameras detect I haven't been funny and stuck something in the general waste, the recycling bin that I shouldn't. They weigh that bin and they put it down again. And then what happens? I get an invoice. So I'm now paying for the waste and the weight that's in that bin. Why wouldn't we? The system we've got now is ridiculous. Why wouldn't we pay? So now I'm fairly in my pocket now. If I recover and I recycle, I don't create any waste at all of a sudden I'm saving some money. And in fact, back to my example of the anaerobic digestion plant. These things, AD plants make money. They want to probably start buying your food waste. I might be brokering my food bin on the gate to the highest bidder. Probably not like that. But what I'm saying is some of this material has value. So my black bag waste, the stuff that I can't be asked to sort, right, I should be charged a fortune for the weight of that bin. That's how pay-as-you-throw works. And I think that's going to be a really important change. As I say, it's happening in some parts of the world already. So everyone doing their bit means a lot. We've looked at some areas today where we can all make a difference. We all need to live our lives a little bit more sustainably. We have no choice. I want to leave you with this website, this thought. Please have a look at this. It's quite interesting. We talk about, this is last year, 2022, Earth Overshoot Day. It's when we, humanity, use all the biological resources that the Earth regenerates in an entire year. Not very good reading, and of course, as you can imagine, this day gets shorter and shorter as time goes on. Waste matters. Thank you very much.
Stay for some questions?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, you've definitely overtaken tax for questions. So obviously, quite a topic that perhaps when you first saw it on the schedule, thinking, oh, okay, what's this going to do? And in some ways, I guess you've not really focused on what we and our businesses and stuff can be focusing on, but really highlighting just how big the issue is, but also some of the stuff that's been coming through. And I think a lot of the questions reflect that. So I guess if you've got any kind of what can I do at work questions, come and see you afterwards, because I'm assuming that's what your organisation does.
Oh, yes. Oh, we're a clean tech company, right?
Yep.
In this sector, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So going through the questions that have been submitted, and thank you for all of them. I'll try and bring a few of them together. If I've missed your specific question, my apologies. On the UK Environmental Act, starting with that, and you praised that very highly. One of the questions that keeps several submissions on was great that it's there, but we had the example in here of sewage in the rivers and it sort of not being followed through, and the idea that great, we've got it, but do we not have a problem with non-enforcement?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the environmental agencies, this act is trying to give us some teeth. And it is difficult to enforce. I think, we might have seen there were some programs recently, it's probably last year, where in fact, guys are getting their camouflage gear on, hiding in known hotspots, for the likes of fly tipping and actually, putting cameras up and so forth. But it's always the difficulty. How do you track and how do you enforce these rules? But things are improving, and that's critical to the act. It's giving the organisations more teeth to attack, to sue people. They're criminal acts. So yeah, I mean, that's the secret of any legislation, of course. This one.
And I guess that goes back to your point about it's no more time for carrots. We need to get to sticks.
Exactly right.
So if you're caught fly tipping, then it's got to hurt you to think, I'm never going to do that again.
Exactly.
And with the picture, I think I overheard somebody from over the table over there. You follow cricket, you've obviously got Hawkeye, but obviously over in South America, they've got vulture eye.
A vulture eye, yes.
Sort of following exactly on that. A couple of questions about the onus. Should it be on individuals, or is it that we need to push that back onto councils and organisations?
The onus is on us, as individuals. I guess, when you think of this organisation, there's a whole lot of bins out the back of this organisation as well. They already pay for their commercial waste collections, and I would hope, of course, they're segregating their waste because they're paying their commercial collectors less. But the reality is the onus is on us. The biggest source of waste is us. And it was accentuated over lockdown because we were all at home. We were creating more residential, more home waste than we'd ever had before. So the issue accentuated over lockdown. But absolutely, it's down to us as individuals.
And so whoever submitted the question, most waste is produced by common household. You obviously know your onions there to have made that comment. So hopefully that's answered that question there for you. Simple one. Waste is the third top source of methane gas. What are the other two and proportions? I'm guessing cows are going to come into it.
Yeah, that's right. Anything that biodegrades create methane gas. It's food waste. It's what other sources of methane gas? I guess any probably some vehicles, commercial. I don't really know what 1 and 2 are. I mean, there are all sorts of contributors to methane gas. Methane gas is one element of greenhouse gas. I mean, there's lots of things that are rolled up into this concept of greenhouse gas. Carbon dioxide never breaks down. at least methane, well, let's say at least methane gas it does break down over 10, 15, 20 years. So there is some reprieve for methane that it does break down in time. But yes, there's lots of nasty things that emit methane gas, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. Looking here, when I was a child, we used to buy white goods, lasted 20 years plus. So I think there's probably, I know the EU has been doing stuff on this, and whether or not the UK's followed with sort of this idea of being able to fix.
Yeah, this is the point I made, wasn't it, about the washing machines, the dishwashers. It is far too easy for us, isn't it, to just buy another one. I think the challenge, as we all know, is finding someone to fix it. But look, the people, sometimes that people have said to me, yes, look, we got stuff fixed. The whole washing machine we're going to throw away, it was one small diode, or in fact, there was a sock stuck in the pump, right? So absolutely, I think the idea that we aren't necessarily making things to last as long to the point that whoever made here, absolutely. I remember Mum's washing machine lasted forever. I don't ever remember it being replaced. We do suffer a little bit with cheaper and poor workmanship, hence the fact we can buy these things for $350. But absolutely, we need to try and refurbish and replace what's going on there.
But I'm guessing with the refrigerators and stuff, it doesn't have CFCs in the back, which is a good
anymore. Anymore, that's right.
And so with that, I guess this is, interesting question submitted, but I guess it's going to depend on what you're comparing, because the person was asking, with the move to electric cars, are batteries going to be the next great waste item? And then are combustion engine cars more environmentally friendly if they can be kept going for longer?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm careful how I answer this because I might not get out the door alive.
Yeah, your V8, Commodore is waiting for you out the front.
Yeah, there are currently paddocks of electric vehicles parked up that are unrefurbishable. They're just not economic. Did anyone see that picture a few years ago of that guy who bought a Tesla? Bought this second-hand Tesla. The batteries were knackered. He blew it up just to illustrate how useless this car now was. The batteries were done. No one would recycle these batteries. The batteries in electric cars take a huge amount, and we'll be back reliant on a couple of countries in Africa for the precious metals that go into these batteries. So I don't think necessarily battery powered cars are the right answer either. No cars is probably the right answer. I know.
15-minute cities?
Or hydrogen. I think hydrogen is probably the right solution for vehicles. I think batteries are really good for storage. Did anyone read the article the other day that all the windmills going flat stick up in the North Sea, they had to turn them off because the transmission lines weren't big enough to get the power down to this side of the country. So they were stopping all these windmills, right? How bloody nonsensical is that? So batteries are a great form, and it was at Brisbane, there was a massive battery put in, wasn't there, for storage for solar or wind, right? So I think batteries in terms of energy storage is a fantastic idea. For cars, we're still lacking a huge amount of infrastructure. There's a huge amount of charging rage going on at the moment, range anxiety. There are problems still, I think, with passenger transport and vehicles.
There's quite a few questions about how these systems would work. Looking at sort of, how do you stop somebody throwing rubbish into your bin if it's pay as you go? Council tax is sort of a form of, pay as you go waste. I guess there are smarter people working on these problems.
It is a bit of a problem, and I'm a bit guilty of as well because I put all my wife's wine bottles in the neighbour's recycling. It's far too embarrassing.
But wouldn't they be getting the benefit of the cost if there's a payback from your glass being
exactly,
recycled?
so they can pay me back later. Look, the technology's moving on. When I talked about trucks that are lifting our waste, the cameras with the AI, they can detect the composition of the stuff that's being done. This is not an exact science, of course. What we're saying is let's get some containers that we know how to segregate our waste, and let's get charged. Let's hit our own pockets for the stuff that we're throwing away. I think that's where we'll get a change in our attitudes towards waste.
And just to finish up and to sort of bring it back onto us as professional bodies, question here. We have mandatory ethics training in the CPD requirements. should we be looking to adopt some form of mandatory environmental training as well to lead by example?
That's a great idea. Just a sustainability topic. The disclosures that are come into force in the UK are forcing our companies we work for to think more about how they are conducting their business. And waste is a really important part of that. You won't see it mentioned in the legislation for all the reasons I've talked about, all the rules, but it's a really important part of what's going on. Us as accountants need to think about this stuff that's coming off the back of the production line, all this scrap steel, we've cut our car doors out, we've got a whole lot of stuff left over. What's the value of that? Where does it go? Is it going back to a foundry again to be melted down and back into a production process again? So as we as businesses, we need to think as part of those disclosure requirements, and certainly something into the ethics training is fantastic idea. Yeah.
And I noted that we didn't have your slides in the pack, so hopefully we can get hold of those in the month.
Sure can.
Excellent. So we'll get those out to you. So if we can, a round of applause for Chris.
Very good.
Thank you very much.